Hey, good morning, everybody. Sorry about that. I'm already having enough technical difficulties this morning. So welcome to Wiggle Wednesday. It's just me today. We're going to be talking about Mycorrhizae, which is the relationship between the majority of the world's plants and certain types of fungi. For reminders today, don't forget about the Worm Conference in North Carolina coming up in October. You can get signed up online. It's also available online to live stream this year, or I'm not sure if it's live stream or taped or whatever, but that's coming up October 21st and 22nd, I believe, are the dates. I'm sick today. I'm going to power through this. I may have COVID. I'm not sure. I haven't gotten it yet, but I feel really bad. So I'm not that I'm normally super lively, but I'm just not feeling the best today. So I want to warn you about that. But I'm definitely going to remember to share my screen today, and we are going to get going here and talking about Mycorrhizae. So hold on one second. All right. All right. So Mycorrhizae. There's a lot of big words when it comes to soil microbiology, and they can be confusing. And this is going to be one of those confusing ones where there's lots of big new words for everyone. I just wanted to point out that I've noticed a lot of people seem to get mycorrhizae and mycelium mixed up, or think that mycorrhizae is like the only type of fungi that there is. But yeah, so mycelium is fungal hyphae when they've overlapped and created strong networks together. That's called mycelium. And mycorrhizae is what connects the worlds under our feet. So today we're going to get into what are mycorrhizae, what do mycorrhizae do. We're going to talk about endomycorrhizal fungi. Most popular one is arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi. Then we're going to talk about ectomycorrhizal fungi, and then talk about some important facts about mycorrhizae, and then we'll get into a Q&A as usual. So what are mycorrhizae? Mycorrhiza literally means fungus root, from, I believe it's Latin. Mycorrhiza is the relationship between a plant and a fungus. Mycorrhizae with an E on the end is the plural version of mycorrhiza. And then mycorrhizal is the adjective describing the relationship. So mycorrhizal fungi is what we're going to be talking about today, and mycorrhizae, which is the relationship between them. So this statistic is a little bit up in the air. I've heard anywhere from 85% to 90%, but generally it's close to 90% that I hear. 90% of plants in the world form mycorrhizal relationships. And like I mentioned, not all fungi in the soil are mycorrhizal. We're going to have other types of fungi. Saprophytes are the main ones. Saprophytes break down dead or decaying organic matter in the soil. And then there are some pathogens as well. But the two main beneficial ones are going to be mycorrhizal fungi and saprophytic fungi. So within mycorrhizae, you have hyphae that connects to the roots, either outside or inside the root cell, and we'll be getting into the details of that. The mycorrhizae consists of a network of hyphae that spread out into the soil, reaching beyond the rhizosphere or the root zone. So, if you've got a plant with a root zone this big, this mycorrhizae is attaching to the roots and increasing the surface area by growing out farther away from there, so extending the reach of the roots. So the hyphae is normally around up to 7 micrometers wide, or what would be 1/25 the diameter of human hair, and the hyphae grow in sections of about 2 inches long. They're going to grow out. Hyphae are going to continue to grow out farther than that, but normally just like little sections are going to be 2 inches long. And there's been fossil evidence that dates back over 460 million years that mycorrhizae played a key role in allowing aquatic plants to move into and survive land habitats. So everything used to be water-based, and life started to move onto land, and mycorrhizae played a key role in this. So what do mycorrhizae do? They're going to act as an extension of the roots that are going to bring in nutrients, minerals, and water in exchange for food. So they've got a symbiotic relationship where the hyphae of mycorrhizal fungi are going to connect to the roots. The plant is going to be producing a lot of energy. We've talked about this with other soil food web characters, where plants are, through photosynthesis, are producing energy, and the majority of that is going out through to feed soil biology through the roots. So plants pump out root exudates that are going to feed mycorrhizal fungi, and in exchange, mycorrhizal fungi are bringing back nutrients, minerals, and water that they've mined from the soil. So they're mining the soil, fitting into places that root hairs can't. So there might be tiny little spots in stones or something like that that a root hair can't grow and push into, but mycorrhizal fungi can reach into there and obtain, even more nutrients and minerals from that area. And then they work like a stomach to digest and access nutrients from organic matter in the soil, all that sand, silt, and clay, along with the bedrock. And then 1 teaspoon of soil can contain, this is the research has found that it can contain 7 to 8 miles of hyphae. So you've got all these tiny hyphae in 1 teaspoon of soil, and they're so tiny and there are so many that they can grow. You can have 7 to 8 miles worth of hyphae in just 1 teaspoon of soil. So if you can think about all this hyphae that's growing into the soil beyond the roots, you're going to increase the surface area and be able to absorb more nutrients and water that can then be shared with the plants. One other thing that they do is absorb water during periods of adequate moisture, and then they're going to hold on to that in their cells, and they can slowly release it to plants during a time of drought. And mycorrhizae also allow plants to communicate with each other. So in the research that I've seen, there are, like in a forest system, you will have like a mother tree who, if you've got some saplings that are growing, and through the mycorrhizal network, the mother tree or mother trees will detect that they need more nutrition to grow, so they'll pump more nutrients to them. Or also, if there's a diseased section of the forest, through the mycorrhizal network, the trees may cut off sending nutrients and water and other things like that to that section, because they know that it's going to die, and so they'll just allow nature to take its course and not feed that section. And then, along with other soil microorganisms, they're going to help to form soil structure. So through the process of digesting, eating away at and consuming soil organic matter and things like that, they're releasing glues and helping to glue soil aggregates together and form structure within the soil. And on top of that, they're going to also help to protect roots from pathogens and disease. So these mycorrhizal fungi either form a barrier on the exterior of the roots, or they're going to penetrate into the roots. And it's just like if you had, I have a picture of security here. So imagine having, like 100 bodyguards standing outside your home, that they're taking up so much space that no bad people are going to be able to come in and get to you, because there are so many security guards that are protecting you. So in that same sense, they're taking up space that pathogens and disease, to not allow pathogens and disease to move in and infect the plant. I need to take a drink real quick. So endomycorrhizal fungi is one of the types of mycorrhizal fungi. And endomycorrhizal fungi form relations with the broadest selection of plants. They're going to mainly form relationships with hardwood trees. I think I've got it in here. Their host plants are going to include veggies, grains, orchard trees, turf grasses, vines, and other horticulturally important plants. So not necessarily forest trees, but fruit trees and things in the middle of succession. If you're looking at succession of plants, they're going to be hosts on, like row crops, corn, tomatoes, peppers, things that you're going to be growing in your garden. And endomycorrhizal fungi are going to penetrate the root into the plant's root cell where they exchange resources. So if you can look at the picture down on the right-hand side here, it's hard to see where that's located, but the line that runs from about the 12 o'clock position down to the 4 o'clock position is the exterior of the root that I'm looking through a microscope there. And then that ball, the circle, is a spore from endomycorrhizal fungi, and growing out of it, it's germinated, and there are hyphae growing out of that. There's a hypha growing out of that spore there. So that's inside the root cell. There are several types of endomycorrhizal fungi, but the largest group that works with the most plants are going to be AMF, or arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi. They form arbuscules, or what look like little tree shapes within the root system. And I tried to find a good picture of this, but I wasn't finding a good picture. These fungi can grow, so when they're connected to the roots, they can grow up to 10 centimeters from the root zone. So they'll grow 10 centimeters out from the root zone, and then they're also connecting with other plant mycorrhizal. So that's how they're growing together and connecting and forming connection underground of all these plants with the mycorrhizae. Most arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi are generalists who associate with a wide assortment of plants. So it's not like there's one particular species that works with a tomato plant and one particular species that works with an apple tree. They're generalists, so the majority of them are going to be working with different types of plants within the soil. And then, the other types of endomycorrhizae, just a few of the other types are ones that form with orchids, rhododendrons, blueberries, azaleas, and a few others. So orchids, if you own an orchid, they are not able to survive at all without some type of endomycorrhizal association. So if you own an orchid, you have endomycorrhizae, the type for them in your soil or in your little pot there. They absolutely need that to survive. And the important thing about endomycorrhizal fungi, other than the fact that they penetrate the root's cell, is that they do not form fruiting bodies, so they don't form mushrooms. Instead, they form spores within the soil. So like what you see here, they're going to be forming either singular spores or clusters of spores just within the soil, and that's how they reproduce. They're going to have spores within the soil that will detect a living root near them through chemicals that are released from the plant, and then they're going to germinate and grow out to meet up with that root, infect the root, and then they'll continue to grow hyphae. As long as there's a living root, they'll continue to grow hyphae and then eventually form more spores. So that's all about endomycorrhizal fungi. We're going to move on to ectomycorrhizal fungi. So these are mainly associated with trees found in forest systems, so like nut trees, hardwood trees, oaks, things like that. They grow around the outer cortical cells within a plant root, so they're not penetrating the cells. Let's say this is a root system here. The cells are within the middle here. They're going to go into the outer cortex of the root, but not penetrate into the root cells. And then these also form a covering, so they're going to form like a sheath around the outside of a root hair. So they're going to really cover that different roots. So on the left-hand side, this is on the right-hand side is a picture of a morel that I picked that's from ectomycorrhizal fungi. And that morel, I pulled out the soil that was underneath it just to check and see what it looked like, to see what I could find there. And if you look at the picture on the left-hand side there, you'll see where I picked the mushroom in the upper left-hand corner. And all those little white things are root hairs that are covered in the ectomycorrhizal fungi. So there you can see that covering around the root zone where it's not necessarily penetrating it, but it's forming a sheath around the outside of the roots. The ectomycorrhizal fungi can grow up to 10 meters from the root zone. So like if you ever go out hunting certain types of mushrooms like morels, you'll see a morel obviously up to 10 meters away from the tree. So that's what's happening, is that you've got trees that are associated with ectomycorrhizal fungi that have all this ectomycorrhizal fungi underneath the soil, and then at a certain point they're wanting to reproduce. So they reproduce through fruiting bodies, which are mushrooms, and those are going to pop up, form spores, and pop out the spores all over the soil so that they can reproduce above the soil. So some associated trees, like I mentioned, include oaks, hazelnut, pecan, pine, conifers, and eucalyptus. Those are just a few of the many. And then, like I said, they reproduce by forming fruiting bodies, which provide spores. So some of the species that are ectomycorrhizal are going to be morels, truffles, boletes, chanterelles, and puffballs. So if you're ever wanting to include, try and include some ectomycorrhizal fungi in your growing medium, if you're, say, starting some trees, some little saplings to grow, you could find some puffballs in the forest and squeeze them to get the spores out, and mix that into your potting soil for potting tree plants. So some important things about mycorrhizae. Mycorrhizae are oh crap, I didn't spell that correctly. That's supposed to say obligate, obligate, obligate symbionts. That means that they require a living host in order to live and survive. So when, like I mentioned before, if you've got spores in the soil, they need living roots in order to germinate and grow. Otherwise, they're going to just remain dormant in the soil or wherever they're located. And they must be near the roots, and I can't remember the exact length away from the roots that they need to be in order to receive the chemical signals from the plant, but it's within a few millimeters. So they're receiving these chemical signals. The spores are sitting there in the soil. They receive chemical signals. They start to germinate and grow out hyphae that connects with the roots. And then they start to take off and grow out into the soil beyond that root zone. So with this in mind, the fact that you have to have spores near living roots, I've always suggested to people that it's better to purchase spores by themselves. So you can purchase spores from different dealers, mycorrhizal spores from different dealers. There's also soil mixes that have spores added, but you're to me, you're wasting your money if you're getting a soil mix with all these spores added, because they're going to be all mixed up in that. And how do you know that they're going to come close to your plant roots? So you're spending a lot of money on spores that aren't even necessarily going to come close to your plant's roots. So it's best to purchase spores and inoculate your plants from a young age with mycorrhizal spores so that they can have the benefit of that biology working with them throughout their lifetime. And if you think about it, the earlier in their life, I've got something that's driving me crazy in my nose. I'm sorry. It's itching me. It's better to incorporate them as early as possible in the life cycle. So, if you have a starter plant of, let's say a pepper that's only this big, it's going to take a very tiny bit to add mycorrhizal spores to that. Whereas if you let that grow bigger, it's going to take 2, 3, 4 times as many spores to inoculate the roots of that. So the earlier you can inoculate it, the better it is for the plant, but it's also better on your wallet because you're spending less money for spores because you're having to use a lot less. And then one thing I really want to point out is that you're not likely to find spores in compost. So when we're composting materials, either through regular compost or worm compost, we're generally taking the above ground material. So leaves, stalks, sticks, banana peels, orange peels, apple cores, none of these things were within the soil, and none of these things are going to have spores because like with mycorrhizal fungi, I said that the spores are released within the soil. So unless you're, digging up large amounts of soil and including that with your compost, you're really not likely to have mycorrhizal spores in your compost. And if you do have spores, they're going to remain dormant, which is good. They're just going to remain dormant until they have a root to connect to. If you happen to have hyphae that had been, like say you're pulling up plants and you pull up, although I would never recommend this, it's best to go no-till, but if you're pulling up the roots of your plants when you're cleaning up a field or something, all those roots are likely to have hyphae connected to them, mycorrhizal hyphae connected to them, but without those roots being living, those hyphae are going to die within a few days. And so they're not going to remain eligible in your, sorry, that's the wrong word. I can't think of the word right now. Anyway, they're not going to be good in your compost for the future to connect to any roots or anything like that. But you are going to have saprophytic fungi in compost. So yeah, I just see that a lot, like on Instagram and the internet, is that people really get Mycorrhizae mixed up with saprophytic fungi. So when you have your compost pile, I don't want to get into this too much to confuse you, but if you have a compost pile and you're seeing mycelium growing on like a wood chip, that's saprophytic fungi that's breaking that wood chip down. It's not mycorrhizal fungi. I just want to make sure that's known. So just a quick summary of mycorrhizal fungi or Mycorrhizae. Mycorrhizal fungi form associations with 90% of plants in the world. They act as an extension of roots to collect and exchange nutrients and water from the soil. They provide plants with foods, water, protection, and allow plants to communicate with each other. They allow access to a larger amount of nutrients, minerals, and water by increasing surface area within the soil. And then ectomycorrhizal fungi penetrate the root cells and reproduce by forming spores within the soil. Endomycorrhizal fungi do not penetrate the cells, but rather grow on the exterior of the root hairs and reproduce by forming fruiting bodies or mushrooms that make spores to reproduce. And then super important is that mycorrhizal fungi are obligate, there I have it spelled correctly this time, obligate symbionts and require living roots to germinate and continue to survive. So now we'll move on to questions. Let me get out of here so I can see y'all's questions. And just give me a second. Oh my goodness. I got to stop sharing my screen and I got to get your comments up here. I'm looking for questions real quick. What and how are you supposed to handle the process during the winter? I'm not really sure what that means, or if you're talking about the mycorrhizae during the winter. So well, it depends on where you're at during the winter, but someone who lives in a place where there's a freeze or hard freeze, all these things are going to go dormant and come back to life and be active in the springtime. Let's see. I'm not seeing a lot of questions. Sorry, the banner was blocking y'all. When will you finish your Compost Tea podcast? The Compost Tea podcast is finished. There's 10 episodes out, which covers everything. I'm going to probably come out with one more episode talking about microscopy and interviewing Jesse Frost from No-Till Growers. Question: would it be okay to inoculate seeds with spores, or would the spores go bad before the seeds germinate? Yeah, so you definitely want to inoculate seeds with spores, either seeds or plant starts. So you could purchase the spores and then put them in with your seeds and kind of shake them around a bit to get the seeds covered with spores, and then plant your seeds. Or if you plant your seeds like in a starter tray, you could make either a liquid slurry with the spores or a compost tea slurry, which would add even more biology and help those spores, but include those spores in there, and then water your trays that you just seeded to get those spores incorporated onto the seeds. Let me see. I think I had maybe one more question. Ed asked, why do we need to know this detail to keep our worms healthy? Ed, all these, sometimes we talk about worms, sometimes we talk about soil microbiology, but what will help plants grow. So as it relates to gardens and plant health, so that's why we're talking about this today. And I just attended a class in Florida on mycorrhizal fungi, and Steve and I thought it would be good to cover Mycorrhizae in one of our topics here. So if you do have any questions about worms, you can put those on the bottom there. What's the best way to get the mycorrhizal fungi to add to your seeds or plants? Online, I would look for a reputable dealer. I tend to try not to promote certain products, but there's a lot of facts on mycorrhizae.com, mycorrhizae.com. You can check out some different informational things on there and videos, and see the products that they have. They've been around for a really long time and have done a lot of research. So I would check them out. Best to leave the roots into the soil to break down naturally, ? Yeah, so if you've got mycorrhizal associations in your garden, you've got a row of pepper plants and they all have mycorrhizal associations and hyphae growing in the soil with them. If you were to, instead of pulling those plants and just chop them at the soil level and compost, or just chop and drop your organic matter, then you've got those roots still in the ground. And if you were to come back and plant other material close by, within the week there, then whatever you're planting would also help to get inoculated by those roots that have been left in the ground, as long as it's not left too long. So if you're someone who's got like a market garden and continuously intensively planting in a garden, so you're growing one crop, and then as that one finishes, you're growing another crop right close to it. By leaving the roots in the ground, you're going to hopefully help those mycorrhizal associations. It's also with that same thought in mind, if you've got if you've got weeds, if you're leaving your weeds in the ground, those weeds are also going to be providing living roots for hopefully mycorrhizal associations. Not all weeds are going to have mycorrhizal associations, but if you're practicing no-till growing, then you are more likely to leave these good biology within the soil. Can you add the English subtitle, please? Honestly, I'm sorry, I'm not feeling well today, and I'm not super techie, and I don't have any idea how to do that. We can see about adding it in. These are going to be on YouTube for you to view in the future, so we can see about adding English subtitles to that. I believe that on YouTube you can maybe go in and turn on English subtitles yourself. I'm not sure, but I'll talk to Steve about that. He's the tech guy. I have stinkhorns in my garden simply because the spores were on wooden posts we put in the ground. I think that's about it for all the questions. Somebody said to check out Jesse at No Till Growers. Yeah, Jesse at No Till Growers is the guy who I was actually going to have on my podcast to interview, because we're working on a project for microscope stuff together. Anyway, I'm not seeing any other questions come through. Thank you for joining in today. I apologize that I'm sick and not doing this the greatest here, and kind of slipping on some of my words. But anyway, I hope you're having a good day. Is leaf mold a natural source of mycorrhizal fungi? No. So leaf mold, any organic matter, is going to be broken down mainly by saprophytic fungi. Mycorrhizal fungi, when they're in the soil and connected to a plant, will grow into the soil and break down organic matter. Yeah, usually when you're seeing fungi on leaves or something like that, that's going to be saprophytic fungi. All right. Anyway, yeah, thanks. I just wanted to check to see if there were more questions, but tune in next week. I've been mentioning PFAS, PFAS. There's PFAS and PFOA that have been in the news a lot lately, called forever chemicals, that are these chemicals that are used in different things that humans use, multiple things that humans use that are sticking around in nature for a long, long time and bioaccumulating and causing health problems in humans and other animals. So I wanted to touch on that next week because it does relate to worm composting and composting if you're putting things in there that contains these PFAS and forever chemicals. So yeah, I plan on touching that next week, Wednesday at 11, and I hope to see you there. Thanks for tuning in today. Have a blessed day, everybody.